Well, as I mentioned, investors not seeing much to cheer about in the quarterly reports from major companies this week. So another horrible day on the Toronto Stock Exchange, plunging by close to 600 points. Since its height, its all-time high only 4 months ago, Canada's biggest exchange has shed 39% of its value now. The Dow Jones lost more than 500 points today, bringing it to a 5-year low, 40% below its record high from October of last year. The price of oil also continues its free fall, plunging more than $5 a barrel today, more than $80 below the record high it hit back in July. And it is largely the same story with our dollar. It used to change by fractions of a cent a day. It's also swinging wildly, falling more than 2.5 cents against the U.S. dollar today, closing below the 80-cent mark for the first time in 3 years. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a small business owner in Canada. Customers are scared. You've bought and sold your product at one exchange rate and it doesn't apply anymore. And you've got loans to repay. Peter Harris shares one of the bleakest economic outlooks of our lifetime.
Canadian border crossings packed with cars heading south, suitcases full of U.S. bargains. This was the good old days. But less than a year later, it's back to this.
We just came up to see this.
The American dollar towering over the loonie, and cheap travel drawing American tourists north.
Canada's always a bargain if you live in the United States, and it's even more so today.
The loonie is in a tailspin, closing below 80 cents today. That's down almost 20 cents since last month, the single worst monthly performance in over 35 years. Uncertainty mixed with crashing oil prices and a stronger U.S. greenback is pulling the Canadian dollar down.
People are very reticent to take on any ounce of risk in their portfolios, and so they are going into U.S. dollar-denominated treasuries, and a lot of currencies are getting sideswiped.
At tonight's World Series opener, 2 Philadelphia Phillies will be slugging for the bleachers using Sam bats. But it doesn't mean an economic home run for the Canadian manufacturer. Owner Sam Hallman ships 90% of his famous bats to the States. A devalued dollar is welcome news, but it won't help if there isn't anyone stepping up to the plate.
If Americans wake up and they don't have money in their pocket, they're not going to be buying bats.
And that's the rub. Here at the Bank of Canada, another 0.25% has been shaved off interest rates to encourage spending. But everyone's nervous. And consumer spending was down 0.3% back in August, well before the economic turmoil. This time last year, the loonie was flying higher than the U.S. greenback, hitting an all-time high in early November. The Canadian dollar hovered at par over the winter and spring. After this past August-long weekend, it dipped and kept tumbling. 2 weeks ago, it dropped below 90 cents, leading to today's 3-year low.
Even as the dollar falls and even as that short-term benefit kicks in, the key question is where the order is going to be in 3 to 6 months.
These days, it's hard for anyone to hit it out of the park. Peter Harris, Global News, Ottawa.
Well, the world's most prosperous countries, they're called the G20, have now finalized timing for a summit to try to coordinate a response to the growing confidence crisis. They're going to meet in Washington in mid-November, and Prime Minister Harper has been working the phones ahead of that meeting, speaking with U.S. President George Bush today and the Prime Ministers of Britain and Australia. They're trying to work on a framework for those discussions. Joining us now, Diane Francis with the National Post. Diane, it's now pretty clear that nowhere safe. Can any one country solve its crisis on its own now, or is it going to take a lot more than that?
No, I mean, the fact is we have a global economy and we have no global governance. And so what we're seeing is the beginning of a global government. That doesn't mean that we're going to have to listen and obey leaders that are elected in other countries. It means that the coordination that's underway now is going to be the norm. It was the vacuum created by a global economy with nobody watching what was going on that brought us to this brink. And I think it's a welcome development.
So international regulation to set some sort of international standard sounds like where they're going. Now, back in Canada with Ontario now the first government to admit that it's running a deficit, how important do you think it is that Ottawa take another look at the numbers? Because I think at this point the next update is scheduled for a month from now, and look how quickly things are changing here.
Well, you know, they're going to be monitoring it. If it's cratering faster than they think, look, Every country in the world is going to run deficits. They're going to be very big deficits in some countries, including in Canada. That's what we have to do. You have to keep pushing on regardless. During the Second World War, for instance, the deficits that countries were running in the war effort were sometimes 3 times higher than their entire economy. And you had to do that. And what we basically are facing now, I'm not saying it's going to be that bad, but what we are facing now is a war against instability. And remember that we may have bankruptcies and unemployment as this, if this doesn't get fixed or repaired, but some countries are going to have revolutions. And we can't have that kind of instability worldwide.
It does feel like, Diane, the dominoes are just kind of lining up.
They are lining up. When trust is gone, credit markets disappear, and then the knock-on effect of all of that becomes worse and worse. Take Canada, for instance. Our banks are in pretty good shape, but now they're up against and competing against banks in Britain and the United States and France that have government-backed loans. They can't compete, so it's going to force us to have to back the loans of our banks, even though they're okay. You see what I'm saying? So it's just everybody's got to do the same thing, and it's got to be coordinated, and it's got to be global. It cannot be isolated. Isolationism and ad hocism is not an option.
All right, Diane, thank you very much.
You're welcome.